In our first video, we looked at what a DTF was just at a high level. Now we're going to dive into what is a DTF by looking at it with a macro lens, very, very up close, where we can point out some of the finer details that make up what we would consider a good quality DTF and why. The reason it's important to understand this and see this is because it sort of grounds you in an understanding of what your or your customer's final print is going to become before you press it onto a shirt. So as you're making design decisions about maybe how thin is a line or colors or how small is the text or should I halftone, being able to see this, understand it, and look at it at a macro level can really help sort of inform those decisions so that you can just it can really help inform those decisions and make it real for you. So let's stop talking and let's take a closer look at this underneath a close-up lens and then underneath a macro lens. This is the print we're going to be inspecting here, okay? This is a lab file that we use to look at transfers on a regular basis. I'll walk you through this at a high level here. Every little piece is something that we like to look at. These little corners here go from 3 points to 2 points to 1 point. There's some colors we look at. We look at some of the gradients on the whites and the blacks to see how they're performing. And then here, these little descending lines kind of show us how well things perform in print and when we heat press as we peel, because it descends below 1 point. We like to see where it pulls off. And then here we look at different lines per inch or DPI and then the amount of fill they have, and it informs us how we're performing when it comes to very small halftone dots. On the back side, we'll take a close look at the thermal polyurethane and how that's choked in and what the registration is. When we look at these, they make a big difference in the ultimate quality of the print. And as we look at this at a macro level, it will kind of reveal why that is. Before we begin, I want to make sure that you see a sense of the scale that we're working with on this macro lens. This is a small ink pen. I've made a little arrow mark right here on that pen, which I'll place from time to time next to what it is we're looking at. That'll help give you a sense of scale for what we're dealing with. We're looking at the front of the print, and let's start in this right-hand corner up front here. And here is a little arrow that will just give you a sense of the scale that we're dealing with. This is a 3-point line. The next one down is a 2-point line. The next one down is a 1-point line. And let me just drop over to another section of the print and show you where this becomes important. When you're making design decisions, understanding how precise you can go is good to know. So here, this little red mark right there shows you where the 1-point mark is on the line, and then you can see it as we go down further and further and further to something that's probably goes down to a 0.5 point and then ultimately descends down to nothing. Let's look a little further down on this at this halftone section here. And what you can see here is 55 DPI, or let's look at the 35 DPI, and then you can see as I go this way with that, how precise you can get with some of the dots and the lines on the actual print. And at a certain point, that actually starts to break down. So your takeaway from here is there is a fine level of detail that you can get to here, and understanding that can inform what it can kind of inform your designs to ensure the best quality final print. One more thing on the front, let's take a look at very small type. So here we have different levels of print, how fine this detail is along here, right? And again, just to put this into perspective, here's how teeny tiny this is. Okay, now the ink on the front of the print is half the story. The other half the story is on the back. So let's start in the same place we did last time when we look at the back. And let's break down what we're seeing here. All right, so you saw from the front that this was a black line. And here you can kind of see the edges of that black line, and then there's some white that is choked in just a little bit from that black line. Now, the black was the ink. Then you have the white backing that we've seen in the previous video when we looked at just from a high level what makes up a DTF. And then we have the thermopolyurethane, and that's that sort of glossy look that you see right there. It's actually translucent when it's cured, but it looks white because you see the white backing there. We'll look at that in the halftone dots where you can see that without the white backing for just a moment. Now, this is a great place to point out the importance of something called choke when you have a DTF print. Choke is how far back is that white line pulled from the edge of the actual color. Because that white backing really helps it pop, and that's great, but if that white backing is out of registration, or if it's too far to one side or the other or overlaps, and you heat press that onto a shirt, that's what can create that appearance of a little white outline on one side or the other of your print. So as a printer, we're always thinking about and readjusting what is the registration for that choke and how big is that choke actually. Okay, let's take a look then at where that comes into play on the second piece. And that was this descending line. So as I move this descending line over, and we're kind of looking right here at this line as it descends over, what you're going to notice is that at a certain point, that white backing is going to go away. Now, if you look closely right here, you can actually see that's that red mark that indicates 1 point. So at 1 point, we still have a little bit of the white backing. But as we move past that and get smaller and smaller, what you'll see is that that white backing goes away. And that's because there's not enough space here for that white to be laid down and still maintain the choke. But what you will also notice is that this glossy, translucent look here, that's the thermopolyurethane. That thermopolyurethane is still being bonded and cured to the ink, even though the white backing is not there. So sometimes we have people ask us, if I don't see white, will it adhere? Yes, it will, because you still have that thermopolyurethane. It's clearly visible there. And as you get to the end, hey, there's a little white here. And this is nice, because what I can point out is that below 1 point, you can kind of think things get a little unpredictable with the white backing. So it may be there, it may not be there. And when you get really, really small, you start to get to the point where your thermopolyurethane can become a little bit unpredictable as well. And let me move up to a solid piece here. What should the thermopolyurethane look like up close? And what you see here is what it should look like. Fairly even coating. Looks a bit like the rough texture of a basketball. Okay, let's go down to the halftone dots, and what I want to show you here is that as the white starts to disappear and disappear and disappear, eventually you'll see the white go away because the choke is what it is. But as you continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller, all of a sudden you start seeing some unpredictability even in the thermopolyurethane. And so these little dots here definitely printed, but what you can see is that sometimes they have a little TPU or thermopolyurethane blob on them, and sometimes they don't. So at a certain point in the print, they do start to get a little bit unpredictable. Now, a quick cheat sheet. If you have anything that is around, say, 35 LPI, that's 35 lines per inch, and you have a fill of around 20%, that's usually predictable. You might want to use ChatGPT to look that up. We'll cover it in a later video, but the number you could remember here is 35 LPI at 20 to 25%. I'll go into that in detail in later videos. I hope that up-close view is really interesting. That kind of reveals what it is that a direct-to-film transfer looks like under a macro lens, and how the ink the white backing, the choke, the thermal polyurethane are all impacting what the ultimate print could look like. Because if you don't have good thermal polyurethane on the back and you peel that away, it may not adhere to the fabric, and that's where you might see very small fine dots or lines start to peel away. Okay, that is direct film transfers up close.